It's Song Talk Radio with Michael, Neil, Phil, and the gang.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're so glad you could join us here on this podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about songwriting and share tips and tricks and insights with you, and hopefully you'll send in your tips and tricks, and together we'll get a little bit better at writing songs each and every show. I am your host, Phil Emery, and joining me, as always, are the dedicated members of the Song Talk Radio Action team. Mr. Neil Modi, how you doing, Neil?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Michael Proudfoot.
Well, hello. And I, too, am doing quite well. You know, all things considering, with the world being the way it is, I'm doing very well. So,
Topsy-turvy.
And we're really excited to have our guest, one of our first guests from way back when we were all so young and full of hope, Loryn Taggart.
I'm Ryan. Very nice to have you back. I think it's been like 6 years or something since last time you're on the show, right?
Just about.
It was actually January of 2015.
Wow.
Oh
That's 5 years plus.
Go.
I don't even know who that
back
was.
when you could walk and park.
Back when I can go and party, and now I'm just a domesticated, at home all the time kind of gal.
Were you a teenager then and you're not now? Is that the big difference?
I don't think that's something we should ask guests.
All right.
First question for our guest is, how old are you? No.
All right. We have a very packed show, so let's get into it for some news off the top.
Yes.
There's some sad news. We have the passing of some pretty big names in music. Little Richard, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, whose fervent shrieks, flamboyant garb, and joyful gender-bending persona embodied the spirit and the sound of the fresh world of rock and roll. He died Saturday at 87 after a battle with bone cancer, which is quite sad.
Wow.
Oh, brutal.
But he's 87, so that's not too bad.
Yeah.
No Little Richard, no rock and roll. I think that's pretty clear.
Pretty much, yeah.
His first hits were in 1957, and he influenced people like the Beatles and David Bowie. And you know, when you watch his stage show from those times, you can look it up on YouTube. He was just absolutely incredible. Like, he was, at the time, people must have thought he was just from another planet. He was so out there. And
yeah, you see some photos of him then, and you go, okay, I can see where Prince got it. I mean, like total like makeup and everything. Someone I didn't realize was hugely influenced by him was John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival. And someone mentioned that to me, and I go, I don't see it. And then she said, well, listen to this.
Oh,
and you
cool.
go, yeah, the way he sings, like the screaming and everything. It's so much like Little Richard, which I'd never thought of before.
Yeah,
I heard a really sweet story about Little Richard. Ava DuVernay, who was a film director, she used to be a waitress, and she ended up serving him a lot. He was, I guess, in the same neighborhood. But she used to see this old lady being driven around the neighborhood in a big Rolls Royce, and she would wave to people, and she'd look at that old lady in the Rolls Royce, and so whoever it was said to her, look at the driver. And Little Richard used to drive his mother around the neighborhood in a Rolls Royce. He comes here every week, or I don't know if he even lived with her then, but he would drive her around. But she said on a $75 meal, he would tip her every time $100. So,
Wow.
So she was a struggling, filmmaker. He really made a big difference to her. I just thought, it's nice, sweet stories about people.
He's very much considered the godfather of rock and roll. And I admit I don't know a lot about 50s rock and roll, in at least not only sort of in an academic sense, in that, Little Richard is the guy that kind of started it. But when I think of the 50s, I think of Elvis Presley as well. Like, I don't know if you guys have some idea about what the relationship was there between, like, who was listening to Little Richard versus where did Elvis land versus Little Richard? Because Elvis as well considered a very early rock and roll, like, really developed.
Yeah, and Chuck Berry and a bunch of others. I don't think there were that many, so I think, there's all of them were really influential. But in terms of the showbiz and the persona, the idea that, rock and roll, you became a different person, I think Little Richard had a lot to do with that.
Okay.
And just the exuberance that he played too, showing what you could do with an instrument.
yeah,
And vocally, I think
yeah.
he showed what you could do vocally, because a lot of other artists were beholden to country and western or blues or gospel, and that was his background. But he took it to a whole other place. This, like you'd mentioned, Phil, like the screaming and the shrieks, and like he just created a language for singing music that turns out, oh, that was rock and roll.
Yeah,
he really amped up his
turns out
performances.
in rock and roll, lyrics don't mean nothing.
True that.
Which kills me, people, because I think lyrics are super important, and people go, yeah, what about Little Richard? They go, okay, fine. You don't need great lyrics. Tutti frutti, oh Rudy.
Emotion.
Rudy, yeah.
Wap bapaluba, a wap bamboo.
Yeah, sure.
His voice to put his ideas across. So, and on May 3rd, Stranglers keyboardist Dave Greenfield died after contracting COVID-19 during a prolonged stay in the hospital for heart problems, and he was 71. Michael, you're
big Stranglers fan. Yeah, they were kind of old for punk/new wave bands, but they had such an original sound, and he had such a really, between he and the bass player, I forget, Jet Black, I think, I can't remember who the bass player is. They just were so aggressive with instruments that, in other people's hands were filler or the melody instruments, and they were made them the rhythm instruments. Did you listen to Golden Brown, Neil?
I did actually. I looked up Stranglers on Spotify because I'd never heard of them before until this news came up, and I was like, "Who's that?" And then you guys mentioned that they were new wave, the British new wave band from back in the day. I listened today. They kind of reminded me a little bit of like Roxy Music kind of vibe, and certainly, what was it called, Golden Brown? Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to hear of essentially a rock and roll band. Sure, they're new wave, but they're still rock music that's very keyboard driven. Usually, 99% of the time, it's guitar driven, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And so it's interesting to hear. I mean, he was using a harpsichord in that song, for crying out loud. Like, it was a really cool riff and kind of a neat thing. Like, I can only think of, like, when I think of rock and roll and keyboards, I think of Genesis with Tony Banks, and very much keyboard driven. And there's a newer band called Keen, which is all kind of piano driven, of course, Elton John and guys like that. But they're really the exception. So it is a different thing to hear that. Hear that as kind of a leading instrument in a rock band.
Yeah.
I said earlier, like, I thought when I was listening to Deep Purple, Machine Head, and the keyboardist in that is really, takes a big role. In a way, I thought other rock bands would, because that was such an influential album. But no one else played keyboards, like he did, like a rhythm guitar or something.
He actually,
very kind of compy. He was a riff guy.
Yeah, he put his keyboard through Marshall amps.
Who? Jim Lord?
Yeah.
Well, it sounded like it. He didn't want to feel left out. Everyone else was through stacks, so he wanted to put his instrument through stacks as well.
Of course.
And for me, this is quite sad. My personal hero and founding member of electronic music pioneers Kraftwerk passed away from cancer at 73. It's Florian Schneider.
So it was cancer. I thought he was COVID as well. No, he was cancer.
No, I think he was just a very short thing of cancer. In 74, they started off actually in the 60s, but in 1974 they had their first hit, Autobahn, and had a number of other hits through the year, and really influenced basically rock and roll in pretty fundamental ways, especially dance music was a huge thing. So.
Right, yeah.
You too were big fans. Which doesn't come across, but their atmospherics and things like that, I think have a lot to do with it.
I'm a huge, one of my favorite Kraftwerk songs is Europe Endless, because it always makes me happy. So listen to that when you get a chance.
Good thing.
For Florian Schneider, who's left us. Okay, so the next topic, this is sort of an interesting point. We're going to be talking about scams that musicians have to deal with.
Oh my God.
For Christmas this year, Heather bought us an Apple TV, and I've actually been using that to sit on the couch and watch quite a few great things on YouTube. And they've been things like guitar and amp repair, bits about various sci-fi properties, and some great music-related informational videos. One of the videos that I came across just recently was from a channel called Ben and Gear, and we'll include the link to the channel in the show notes. And he put out a video called 3 Scams That Target Musicians. The 3 ones he talks about are, 1, pay for play, which is, basically you have to pay someone for the right to play at a club or something.
Like South by Southwest?
Kind of like that. One is the laser publisher, and the third one is pay for pitch services like Taxi and X-Ray. I thought he had some interesting insights. It's well worth taking a look for it. I'll talk about number 1 and number 3. I think they're kind of the same. So pay for play, how that works is you get an email from someone and they put together a night of very often in between 8 and 25 acts. And the idea is that you buy tickets from the promoter and you sell the tickets, and you're able to play, like a 20-minute set. And of course, what happens is you wind up selling the tickets to your family and your friends, and maybe some friends of friends, and you wind up playing for people basically who are just your friends. Has anyone else had any experience with this pay to play format?
Yeah, we did it once. Yeah.
Sorry, Lauren, what?
I've been contacted to do something like that in Toronto, I think. I don't think it was Montreal, but they said you have like a certain amount of tickets to sell for quite an absurd amount of money, and whichever ones you don't sell, you have to pay for. So you have to sell 30 tickets for this much money. Whatever ones you can't sell, you just cover it. But then there were promises of the audience is going to be rec execs and promoters and managers. And I mean, I wouldn't do that. I'm a university student. I'm not paying that much money, but I throw my own shows anyway. I just produce my own concerts, but they work you as a young and vulnerable artist. They say the right things. They definitely can say the right things.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you don't, and I think that's what he flagged in the video. They really prey on up and coming young musicians for that one.
Who want their break. Yeah.
And I mean, record executives will not be there.
No, we can guarantee that right now. If you pay for play, there will not be executives there. There won't be any record people there.
Yeah.
Now, it is kind of a bad thing, and I think you should try to avoid these kinds of things, because basically you wind up getting playing with 20 bands, and the sets keeps on getting pushed later and later, and you won't get on till like 3 a.m. That's anytime someone's that I know has done that, that's been their experience. But if you've never played anywhere before, that it might be a way of getting into the experience of playing in front of people. I mean, it's not ideal.
So you're endorsing this?
No, I'm not endorsing it, but there is a certain amount of usefulness. If that's the only way you can actually get on stage. I know different cities have different environments. In Toronto, it was always fairly easy to get a gig. At least like Monday on a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
There's enough venues. Even Vancouver now, there's not as many venues as there used to be 5 years ago.
Yeah. So
How was
maybe
Montreal, Lauren?
Montreal's great, actually. It's very, very supportive. When I first got here, the advice that I got from a lot of people was the open mics, because the open mics are renowned and a lot of very, very successful musicians attend them. And they're much more supportive, I have found, in the ones in Toronto. I feel like Toronto's a very specific niche. But I would play an open mic night, and then within the night have 5 contacts for forming a band. I met all of my session musicians via open mic nights. Very supportive here, very supportive. And then when actually doing my own headlining shows, I just send out my EPK to venues and give them a date and my audience guarantee. And then we just kind of set up a date from there. I've been producing concerts for so many years now. I've just learned how to work it.
And Montreal has a lot of venues Like there's a lot of places where live music is played?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much appreciated here. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's certainly the thing that I tell people, like from our meetup or when we meet at one of our shows or something, and they want to get into things. I tell them, yeah, hit the open mics.
Mm-hmm.
You got to kind of work your way up, from the bottom rung, so to speak, right? If you play the open mics, you'll get invited back to those venues. You'll meet other people. You'll make connections, and do that sort of thing. I mean, the pay for play is potentially the quick way in. And certainly, like you're saying, Phil, like if you're really starting out, then yeah, you could probably sell 20 or 30 tickets to your family and friends, because when you're first starting out, they all want to come to your show. They're going to give up on you after that. But they're going to come to the first show. So maybe that's not such a bad thing.
You get one shot at that.
Yeah. The other thing that these pay for play organizers do is that of course, the more tickets you sell, they give you the better slot. They'll give you the 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. slot. If you sell a few tickets, then you end up with the 7 p.m. slot. And they're often cramming 20 acts into one night, or a lot of acts.
Yeah. So it's always a variation of this is the pay to pitch, and that's a service like Taxi. And the idea is that you want to have your music placed in things like commercials and movies and video games. The idea is that Taxi and services like Taxi will actually pitch your stuff to music supervisors. The problem is that most music supervisors don't really work that way.
Yeah, I've done that. I've worked with music supervisors, and we never took pitches. The whole point of hiring a music supervisor is they know musicians, and so if I go to them and go, okay, I want something that sounds like Britpop, they'll go to artists that they know have this sound and ask them to do a demo. They never take unsolicited pitches. It's like it's a crazy.
I remember, Phil, a while back you were looking at Taxi. Did you actually register with them and go through with it?
No, because I asked around, and that's what you should always do when you're going to a new service. Now, Taxi has been around for as long as I can remember. I'm back in the, when I was in my 20s, I think they were around.
Just to make it clear, this is not Taxi, the ad agency. This is a different Taxi.
Which I thought they were one and the same. So I actually thought, maybe it was an outgrowth, but this is a different service. So I did look at it. And I never, put the money. It's expensive. It's $300, and then other fees, and then I think it's like $10 each song for them to listen to it or screen it. The only advantage of this could be apparently they have a great community, so you get to network with other people, and also that it gives you something to shoot for. So if you haven't actually composed a lot of commercial spots or movie type spots, this will give you something to work towards. They'll say, we have a spot for a car commercial. Then you go, okay, I'm going to start to learn how to write a spot for a car commercial. So it's a way of actually kind of almost being given assignments and a deadline to complete it. So there may be a little bit of utility, although.
Well, I would say for that, like Songwriters Association of Canada or other songwriting associations, they do that as well, and they're not.
They're not for profit.
They're not necessarily. They're supporting the artists, and there's a community there. And when they do have these challenges or whatever, you do get. Okay, we'll write for a car commercial, or we'll write for a country artist, or we'll write for a TV show, and your chances of placing on that again are slim to non-existent, but at least you're working in a community and you're not paying for it, What I found interesting in that pay to pitch though was when he pointed out the rights, because they generally take 50-50, and you go, 50-50, it's not bad, it's better than nothing, but you already own your master rights, right? Yeah. And so the 50 they're taking is so you're basically taking everything.
That's the.
If you're going to do 50-50, they should take a quarter and a quarter of your sync rights, or whatever it was, licensing, whatever it was.
Yeah, that was the lazy publisher point he was talking about.
Oh, was that the lazy publisher? Oh, okay.
Yeah. A bit more confusing, but basically, never. I think the short answer is to never actually sign an exclusive contract with anyone until you get a lawyer to pay for it.
Yeah.
People think lawyers are expensive, and they are, but not having a lawyer look at something could be far more
Way
expensive.
more expensive.
True.
Like they say education's expensive. Try not having one.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, right?
That's a good one. I like that.
How about you, Loryn? Have you been approached by any kind of publishers or anything like that?
Or for placement in places?
No. I have two answers to this. One, I do have a licensing deal with a song. And it's I found this company through a musician that I'm friends with, but they're Juno-winning musicians. It's just their publisher. And that was a contract that we settled, and I made sure that all my rights were there, and they take about 10%, but it's within their roster. And so if people approach them for a certain sound, they just kind of can go through this specific music supervisor's roster. So I have that just for one song. I'm waiting to sign with a label and finishing my album before I actually get a full licensing deal. I do have a lot of musician friends though that fall for the pay to pitch and certain submit programs that, if you pay for this song, it'll be sent to 1,000 Spotify playlists and blogs and such like that. But the marketing and the PR that goes behind pitching to Spotify is a long campaign, and it's not an easy road. So anything that seems very, very good to be true and easy genuinely is too good to be true. You need a full PR campaign before you start doing that. So
I always get one of those messages when I upload something to SoundCloud for crying out loud.
Oh yeah.
But then within an hour, someone messages me on the thing and says, "Oh, submit your thing here," and you'll get, I'll put it onto Spotify playlists and whatnot. And everything. I'm like, spam.
I get emails all the time like, "Hi, we're such and such records, and we checked out your music, and we think it's really cool. We'd like to offer you this deal." And then I email back and say, "Cool, what's your favorite song of mine?" And the conversation from there always just
the one about
spiral
the thing.
down. They go, "Oh, you have a good sound," and I'm like, "I'm jazz, right?" It's for them to go back and say, "Well, what sound in particular suits your fancy?" Because jazz is not entirely the movie market for your specific record label. Because I'll go and search the label, and it'll be some like hip hop label, and I'm like, really? I write jazz songs, sir. But but again, I completely understand why vulnerable artists who are trying to get their break are going to fall into it.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, and as you say, if it sounds too good to be true, it is true.
It is.
It is.
And one thing someone told me, a really important thing to do is to find a music lawyer, because I know a lot of labels won't even accept unsolicited material because they don't want someone coming back, in 5 years saying, "Oh, this is actually my song. I submitted it to you." So I know a lot of people won't take unsolicited stuff unless through a music lawyer. So again,
it's got to go through channels where they can track it. It's the same with submitting screenplays. Like that, you have to go through channels so it's documented, so they are legally covered. They won't listen to unsolicited material, and people will read unsolicited screenplays.
I always kind of wonder about those, songwriting competition things, because they say, they have a list of all these huge stars that are going to listen to your songs. They are not listening to your songs.
No.
Maybe the top 3, maybe, but these are professionals whose time is worth a lot of money, and they may be supportive of songwriters. There may be a few, but in general, they are not listening to your songs. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because it can be a great motivator. It can be a lot of fun to do. You might get some response, but be realistic with what you expect to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But back in sorry. Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
Back in January of 2015, when we were just starting out, we had a guest that simply blew us away, and that guest was Loryn Taggart. The video.
She's back. She's back.
Yes.
Because I was worried, actually, Loryn, because I saw you were in Australia at one point. And I thought, why did she move to Australia?
Yeah.
But
I think
we're doing this by Skype now. That could have worked.
That's
More material.
true, actually.
Live in the middle of the night for us or for you, but
Yeah.
And Loryn Taggart is a jazz folk award-winning songwriter from Montreal, Canada. And she had just finished up a tour opening for Donovan Woods and is coming back to Song Talk for the second time to catch up on her most recent projects. So now you were in Toronto for a while. Why did you move to Montreal?
Montreal, couple reasons. One was I wanted to go to Concordia University. It was the only school I applied to. It's the only school I wanted. I got in, so I decided to move. My family is also from Montreal. My mom was born here. My grandparents are from here. So I wanted to kind of continue the legacy. I did want to work on my French and the music scene. I've been living in Toronto for a few years, and balancing an art career, affording an art career is actually what I should say, was not easy.
Have you written any songs in French?
I've tried. I've tried multiple times, and then I'll send it off to. It's tough. And then I'll send it off to I have a friend of mine, a French producer in France, and I sent it off to him, and he texted me back and said, "Tout besoin professeur," which means you need help, essentially. So not quite there yet.
It's hard to be poetic in a new language, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, a second language especially, because the slang that people understand and the way that words flow together, and just because they rhyme in French doesn't mean they're actually going to make sense to anyone. And I really, really pushed it for the beginning when I first moved to Montreal. Realized it was a lot harder, and I was a bit naive about it. And it's actually what the song we're going to listen to today, has a lot to do with that development. So we'll talk a lot more about that.
Okay.
I'm going to listen to it.
Can you talk a little bit about how that song came about?
The guest?
Yeah.
Do we want to listen to it first? Or how do you guys want to do it?
Hey, who's running this show?
I have a system. I have a method to madness.
All right.
Let's listen. Let's listen to it. Then we'll talk about it.
Listen to The Guest by Loryn Taggart.
What's the status of your soul? Would you come back a ghost? Are you gonna walk this alone? Man, I wish I was stronger. What's it like being cold? Is it impossible to be taken seriously? Man, I wish I was fonder of you. My tears are inflamed, and you can look for free, but the guests at the party, they don't exist. You'll never be the same. Just you wait and see. What's the point of getting old? I've taken one too many, and I'm told that I'm stubborn now, but I will somehow be bolder than you. My cheeks are all inflamed, and you can laugh for free. But the guests at the party, they don't exist. You'll never be the same. Just you wait and see. A year from now, they'll be calling. You won't hear a thing. You won't hear a thing. No, you are right. Oh, you right. That I don't need nobody to rely on but myself.
Wow, what a brilliant song.
It's beautiful.
Oh, fantastic. I love the line, "Man, I wish I was fonder of you."
Say that again?
I love the line, "Man, I wish I was fonder of you." I thought that was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about how the song came to be.
So, quick summary. Yeah, it's the song is about my move to Montreal and everything the hardships that I went through moving here as an English person. So a lot of it has to do with me learning French, and I learned French on the job, and I've faced a lot of difficulties day to day with being an English person here. And I wrote the guest. I pulled it from like different areas of my life. The lyrics, I actually pulled from an English class. I'm in university right now and I'm studying English literature, which is a bit ironic for moving to a French city to do that. But it's the lyrics I pulled a lot from my English class. We were studying the poem Rhyme of an Ancient Mariner. And a lot of the lines throughout the guest are actually tweaked lines from the poem, which I can get into in a bit. I started listening to a lot of Montreal artists when I moved here, started to become friends with a few of them, artists like Franklin Electric and Patrick Watson and Half Moon Run. And I started to pull that like really soft piano, emotional driven songs and started to mesh them together. And before I even wrote the song, a friend of mine, Steve, he's the one that recorded it. We were talking about doing a song together. And I said, I've got, a few songs that I've written that I'd like to do. And he says, no, write something new and write it on the piano. He wanted a piano song and I don't have any piano songs. And I said, I got no ideas. I don't really write on the piano as much. And he said, is there anything that you really want to say right now? You've been in Montreal for 3 months. You're kind of having a hard time. Do you want to talk about that? And you should really put that in a song and put it on piano and make a statement out of it. And the guest started to grow, and I just started to pull pieces from my life and throw it into this song. And being in this class and things that my professor would say. One of the stanzas in the poem, Rhyme of an Ancient Mirror, in part 3, the first line, it goes, her lips were red, her looks were free, her skin was white as leprosy. And we were talking about someone having to face embarrassment and not being able to run away from it, and looking at people for free and they can't run away. So I just started to pull these like different aspects of my life and put it into this song. As my small summary.
Right.
The lyrics are very evocative, which is interesting now to hear you explain them, because they're very open to interpretation. Because I got sent down a track when you talk about being a ghost, because it also, so much of it seems sort of like a visitation from someone who has passed. So many of the lines in there too, and especially with the haunting way you sing it. So it was very interesting to go down that road and then hear a different interpretation of it.
That was sort of my interpretation as well. At first I thought it was about someone who had passed away. Then I thought maybe it's a metaphor for more of a social isolation or something like that. But again, the specifics are certainly not there in terms of your personal journey. So obviously that's deliberate. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that approach, because I think, like a lot of singer-songwriters may opt to just say it plainly, but you've decided to say it in such a way that, I mean, obviously you knew that it was going to be interpreted in different ways.
Definitely.
Is that something you, like, obviously you wanted to do that, but maybe you can just talk about that process a little bit, about how you go from A to B. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Very, very true. I start with lyrics that can be seen pretty plainly. I mean, I did start to piece things together from this poem for the chorus. For the verse, I started my A to B. So my A was kind of more questioning people that weren't treating me very well, or people that I was embarrassed by, or and it really had to do with me trying to speak French and me learning how to adapt to this city. And it wasn't always met with warmth. There have been a lot of supportive people, but the ones that didn't meet me with warmth, I started with questions like, how could you be so cold? And how could you, I would come home from work some days just crying, and I'm like, I just don't belong here. I feel like I'm dead here. I feel like I'm isolated. I feel like I don't belong. And it just started to kind of bring in these questions of, the line, what's the status of your soul, really was like, where's your heart? Why are you like this? Why don't you accept me? Which then kind of brought in will you come back a ghost? Like, you're dead to me. It just, the A line was, what's up with you? And it brought me to, what's the status of your soul? What's the status of your heart and your mind? And they're just questions that go back and forth. Like, are you going to walk this one alone? Which is a question to myself. Are you going to keep going? Are you going to try this? And what's it like being cold? Which is another question to someone. Like, what's it like being so cold-hearted? And then the chorus goes into that, taking from the poem. My cheeks are all inflamed, or I'm blushing, I'm embarrassed. And I can't run. You can look for free. I got nowhere to go. So it's really just this, it truly is on the surface, trying to fit into a new city where you don't speak the language and not being able to run away. That's where this came from.
It's interesting. I have a very I love Montreal, but I have a visitor's love of the city. I love the culture and all that. It's very different to travel to a city versus trying to live in a city, and it's interesting how it's
100%. 100%. I felt the same when I moved to Toronto. I came from a very, very small town in Alberta, and Toronto was a shocking city. And then I think I lived there for 3 years, 3 years. And it hardened me up for sure. I definitely gained a little bit of a hustle and a little bit more blunt, and I'm a little bit more like get stuff done. So when I got to Montreal, I still had a bit of a hustle, and so I was able to go, I was ready for Montreal. and I love Montreal. Now that I've been here for almost a year, I'm head over heels for it. It's an incredible city.
That's good.
But at first, it was that same kind of adjustment that I really had to gain some thick skin if I was going to learn a new language on the job. And like I said, I wasn't always met with acceptance. And that was a new thing for me to learn. I hadn't experienced that before. It was very embarrassing. So,
can I ask you about the music as well? Did you start with the lyrical idea and find music that fit with that, or fit with the mood? Or did you have some piano piece that was kind of separate and they just happenstance connected? How did the music come about?
I'm very much a music person first, and then find the melody, and then find the lyrics to fit that melody. That's always my 3-step program.
This does sound very melody driven.
Yeah. So I find the chords that make sense in a story. I find the chords that make sense, and then I'll try different ways with my voice. A musician friend of mine said that falsetto is very in right now, is very much the trend. So try going up. I go, oh, this is it. And I was like, okay, I'll try some falsetto. He's like, Bon Iver, and, try and get your voice up for the chorus. So I thought, okay, well, so it's usually music first. And I was just listening to this one specifically. I was listening to the same records over and over, and it was The Wave by Patrick Watson and In Your Head by Franklin Electric. And I really was learning a lot of the songs on those albums just for fun on the piano. And I kind of worked my way around some of the chords, and then took some of the chords and pieced them together, and then slowly formed this song. But I full on had the piano first before anything.
Okay.
So I was very just inspired by other musicians and pieced it together.
How about the next song, the wedding song? How did that one come about?
Oh man, are we gonna listen to that one as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll listen first and then talk. Is that how you want to do it, Loryn?
That's the system. That's the system I've created for myself.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
here we go.
You are the guest.
Song by Loryn Taggart.
I've tried all of the words, and I've tried so hard it hurts to write a song about you and me. But Lennon was the jack of his time, and Swift stole all the good rhymes. It's a miracle I'm still here. What do I do when the words are all used? Do I sit back and take in this moment? Do I cover it down? I know you'd sing it well. Do I sit back and take in this moment? La-di-da, 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 di-dum, di-dum, dum. When the words can't find me and I can't find them, I'll mumble the chorus and we'll just pretend that today we're brilliant, tomorrow depends. Now, may we have your attention? I didn't win with abstract affection. I said, boy, would you marry me? This won't be a wedding song when it comes to the dance. We'll stay to the chorus of the king's romance. It's the scent of my hair and the deaden of my touch. I just hope to God that's good enough. So what do I do when the words are all used? Do I sit back and take in this moment? I'm in hysterics, 'cause I'm looking for lyrics. I'll sit back and take in this moment. La di da, la di da, la di da, la di da, di dum, dum. La di da, la di da, la di da, la di da, di dum, dum.
Delightful.
I'll be the first to say there's nothing wrong with liking your own songs. I really like that song. I think it's huge.
Yeah.
I love that song.
It was reminiscent sometimes of Morrissey. I thought, but Lennon was a jack of his time. Swift stole all the good rhymes. It's a miracle I'm still here, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah, that was I had a very long a pun list of all of the greatest songwriters. So like, I think it was something like, my original pun was, it's a Stevie Wonder that I'm still here instead of a miracle. Or if we sing Katy Perry, we'll all be merry. I just had this list of puns and lines, and I said, okay, which one is good for this song? I'll just sing Adele. She sings well. I just kept going until we found the right ones.
You could do great stuff live with this too, you know. I usually switch it around, and there's a line that I'll do live now that I'm in Montreal. I'll say the line in the chorus. Do I switch my language? And I'll say Je prendrai mon de nuage, which, if I pronounce that right, it means I take words from a cloud. So I'll like take words out of thin air. Like you can come up with anything. You can improv and like pull someone out of the audience and be like, I'll sing like the guy in the blue t-shirt. But you know what? I got nothing. My improv isn't great right now. But I just had this huge list of puns and was like, well, Swift is stealing rhymes and who's the greatest songwriter of all time? And I just had this huge list.
That's actually one of the really cool things about this song is the quick rhymes, like the internal rhymes, and sort of in the line, which is very very consistent that way, but loose enough at the same time. The thing that threw me about this song when I heard it was like the chord progression is the same in the verse and the chorus, right?
Yeah.
And the bridge has a different chord progression, but then verse 2 structurally is actually a little bit longer than verse 1. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if that was on purpose or whether it just sort of you just had some extra lines you wanted to fit in there, but like
I had a longer point to make, so I just kept singing, and I said I need to round this up. Originally, the second verse, I was trying to say so. This song came together in two ways. First of all, it's my ode to songwriting, and it's my give up song. I had such an intense songwriter's block, and I was like, well. And that's what ironically started the idea was like, well, I have no idea what to do because they're all done. And I've always said that songwriting is the perfect marriage between lyric and melody, and both of them have to be clever in order to create a very good song. So I was like, well, I'll create a wedding song, like the marriage of music or whatever. And then the idea stemmed from that. Was like, well, what is the wedding song? And the wedding song to me is Elvis Presley's Can't Help But Falling in Love. So originally the second verse was supposed to say something like, I'll stay to the course of the king's romance, and the king being Elvis. I'll stay to the course of the king's romance. And I was supposed to try and get into the melody, or stick to the course of the king's romance. And I can't help but falling in love with you. And I was trying to like really cleverly get that line in there, but it was so hard. So I just made the verse longer and came up with my own line. But we were really trying to fit some very clever lines into this song and try and make it like as Easter egg-y as we possibly could. But what we came up with was pretty good.
I love the.
In some ways, it's maybe better you weren't so overt about it a lot of the time.
Say that again.
Maybe it's better you're not so openly and overt about the Easter eggs. They're a little bit more subtle and just sort of hint, wink, wink from the side. You know, not like hey, I'm being clever here, but it's kind of in the background, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, the wedding song being Elvis Presley, and we say the chorus of the King's Romance. Like, who am I to write the next big wedding song next to Elvis Presley? Who am I? You know? And it was that question over and over. Like, John Lennon was like the jack of all trades, and that's what Jack means. Swift is an incredible songwriter, and Adele's a better vocalist. Like, it was just all this question of like, why do I even try? Mm-hmm. And that's why I added in at the end of the chorus the la-di-das.
Yeah.
Just as this like, I can't write a song. There's too many good musicians out there. La-di-da, as if to like sit back and go, I can't swear on this show. So la-di-da. La-di-da is my clever way of swearing in the middle of a song. Like, la-di-da. And then the fun thing to do is to get the audience to sing that back. So I'll usually force my audience to sing, and they're usually very good about it. And I'll just go, everybody, la-di-da. And it's very fun. It's very fun.
That's a really instructive thing for other songwriters too, is that like most songwriters, especially highly structured pop rock type of thing, even singer-songwriters, they tend to think verse 2 has got to be the same number of bars and the same length as verse 1. It just has to be. That's the kind of rule. But here's where you've gone out of your way to break it because you have more to say, which is and it's perfectly natural, because I think part of it is that the chord progression and the melodies have a very resolved bit at the end of them. And as long as you hold that tension where you're carrying on, you can keep that verse going as long as you need to, and then just resolve it the way you resolve the other parts, and then you're done. So it's very clever that way, and interesting, but also instructive that, you know, the rules, quote unquote, don't always apply, and you can break them.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier that, like you said, the verse and the chorus are the exact same chord progression. And again, because it was a wedding, I wanted it to make it sound like a wedding waltz. And like the same loop over and over. So kind of the melody to me, if you just listen to the music, kind of sounds like two people doing the square, the box ballroom dance or something. It's just like the constant loop of something to be dancing to.
Definitely.
So I'm trying to like structure a full song like that. So every single element of the song makes sense. And then, but it really is a song about my love for songwriting and love for music. This was not dedicated to any boy. And the line, now may we have your attention. I didn't win with abstract affection. I said, boy, will you marry me? That line essentially was just my give up line. Like, I'm not going to try and write you a song. I'm not going to, because the songs are all written. Just, boy, will you marry me? Straight up, I love you. You don't need a song. You don't need, I hope that I'm good enough. I hope that whatever I say is good enough. So that was that kind of line. And this was fun to write. I wasn't going to record the song. I didn't love the song when I first wrote it, but I brought it to my producer, and he loved it. He had it stuck in his head. And I just said, I don't know how to finish the song. I don't know how to wrap it up. And he says, he just kind of countered it and said, why don't you throw like a really nifty little bridge in the middle of it? Change the structure, and then finish it off with the Elvis Presley praise, and then finish it off with your la-di-das again. And it was a tough one to record. It was recorded on a classical guitar, and my hands are too small for classical guitar. So singing and playing it at the same time were very hard. And I almost entirely gave up on the song, and then we slept on it. Next morning, got to the studio, recorded it on the first take, and it's almost the best one I got. So
it's great. A lot of people do try to write songs about songwriting, and they often don't come out well. They can come out a bit twee. They can come out a bit inside baseball. But this was just just clever enough. And it's a great song. I mean, it's I can see this one getting a lot of licensing,
Yeah. Maybe I'll pay to pitch it, and
that's how you do
put it in their movie. Yeah.
You mentioned working with. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just real quick. It was nominated for Love Song of the Year at this year's IMAs, and I found a lot of irony in that, seeing as it's just not a love song to a specific person. It was the only song in the category that wasn't an actual love song, but it's just a love for music in general.
Well, it doesn't have to be a love between two people in a romantic sense. Love songs can be, if you love the music, then that's what it's about. That's okay.
It's about the music. It's always
still a
about
love
the
song.
music. Yeah.
And the fans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You mentioned working with your producer. I was just curious, for you, how do you work best, or what do you look for when you're working with a producer?
My producer is the bomb. His name's David. First of all, it has to be right. You got to have a very good chemistry and the ability to be very, very vulnerable with someone, especially with something like your own lyrics and your own music, because they're going to have their own ideas. And he also produced in my company. We actually recorded both these songs in one weekend. I met him I backpacked America 2 years ago, and I couch surfed the entire way. And he was my couch surfing host when I was in Boston. And so pure chance. And we got along so well. And he told me he was a producer, and I said I'm a musician, and the conversation ended there, really. And then I continued my travels. I ended up moving to Asia for a while. And he said, if you ever come back to North America, come down to Boston and let's just sit in the studio and see what happens. And I flew to Boston, and we did both those songs, In My Company and The Wedding Song. And he just knew how to pull the right emotion out. He could hear, I don't know how he does it, but he can hear things in the lyrics and in my voice. And he suggested it can be one word tweaks in a song, and he's so good. Like for In My Company, that song starts with just a breath. Instead, I used to do a little guitar intro, and he says, cut the intro and just start with a breath in, breath out, and then sing. And it's like something so simple. To work with a new producer, it has to be right. The chemistry has to be strong. You have to be vulnerable with each other. And he understands me on a very, very good creative level. So, we get into the studio space with the skeleton of a song, and we just form it from there. Cut a demo, strings, harmonies, whatever, and we'll just talk back and forth until something makes sense. But he has a magic touch for sure. He really does.
Excellent.
That's great. Because I'm starting to run out of time here on Song Talk.
It's dark now. It was light when we started. I got the dark sunset.
Sun is setting.
Special
That's
thanks
how we
to
know.
Loryn Taggart. Loryn, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
How do people get
Loryn
more?
awesome stuff.
Thank you so much. This
How do
is
we get more of your
amazing.
stuff?
Sorry?
How do we get more of your stuff?
I'm on Spotify. I'm on Bandcamp. The easiest way is LorynTaggart.com.
Spell Loryn Taggart for it.
LorynTaggart.com, and that will link you to my YouTube, my Bandcamp, my latest album release, my Spotify, all in one place.
Fantastic.
I seasoned up, so I know how this works now.
Yeah.
All right, send us your impressions on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Song Talk Radio, or send us an email at feedback@songtalk.ca. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. And then please stop by the site at songtalk.ca. Subscribe today to the Song Talk Radio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher.com, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or TuneIn.com, or any place that fine podcasts are carried. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at the site as well. You can find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned here on this show on our resources page. And don't forget, you can follow Neil at
NeilModi.com.
You can follow Michael.
Sort of. On Instagram at Kraftwerk420.
and get more stuff. Loryn stuff.
Random. I swear to God, it was random.
Yeah, sure was.
Sure it was.
I believe you.
And you can follow me at The Phil Emery on Twitter. Stop by the website at songtalk.ca to browse past shows and find out how you can be a guest. Stay safe, everyone, and keep on writing. Good night, everyone.
So long.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Au revoir.